So now what we need to do is to filter the Pokemon. So we have a search bar here, and then we also have the drop down filter for the type of Pokemon that we want to receive. So let's just search for the electric type Pokemon. You can see all of these are electric type Pokemon, and they are contained within the types array. So that is fine. But what if I wanted to search for Electrode? I can add that in as well. So I can filter it down. So elect, and then there are two Pokemon with elect within their name. So that is fine as well. So let's add this into our functionality. So in our app, we need to render that over here. So let's go ahead and essentially create a search component or a search bar component, and then a drop down component as well. So in our components up top here, I'm going to create a new folder for the search bar. And essentially, this will have an index.tsx and REFCE. So let's just quickly create this, which is a search bar. And in this search bar, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have two style components, which is a container, which is the div, and then the search, which is the input. The search input is of type text, and then the value and the on change will be coming from the props here, so it's reusable. So let's just add the search in here, and then also the set search. Whenever the user types in a character on the keyboard, then that is an event that changes and updates the search value based on whatever they type in, and it adds it in using the set search that is coming from the useState. So in Gatsby, as I mentioned before, we can use the React hooks, and then we also need to filter this. So whenever we map over the array of nodes in here, we are filtering based on the value that is coming from the search bar. So let's go ahead and add the style components in. So what I'm going to do is just paste in the styles for the search bar, and then let's import in the container from /styled and the search from /styled. So now if I save, I now need to render the search bar onto the home page. So let's go into the home page, and here what I'm going to do is render the search bar, and we also need to pass in the relevant prop. So what we need to do is create the state for this. So const search and set search is equal to react.useState, and initially it's going to be empty. So let's pass in the relevant search props. So search is equal to search, and set search is equal to set search. And again, this might not be the most optimal way to do your imports. You could use libraries like React Hook Form, or you could also use the useRef hook. So it's up to you how you want to do that. So let's save this. And now we have a search bar in here that when we type, nothing happens as of yet because it's not hooked into this grid here. But essentially, we are saving whatever we type in to the search field here. So that is the first one done. What I'm also going to do is do the same for the drop down. So let's just copy the drop down and paste it in as a component. Essentially, this index here now, it has a set type prop being passed in. So we initially have a piece of state for this. So let's go ahead and create that. But before we do that, we need to access the Pokemon type options, which is a helper, which means that we have an array of objects in here. And in this array of objects, essentially what happens is each one is a value. So initially we have the select Pokemon type value, and I'm just going to change this to an empty string because that is what we would have as the empty string within the piece of state. Then we have the fire type Pokemon, grass, bug, and so on. So this is the list we're going to map over in our drop down over here. So this is the list here. And then what we want to do is map over it, and then whatever we select, we would then hook that into this grid here as well. So let's go ahead and go into the index again. We're mapping over it. So for each type, we are having an option, and this is essentially a select drop down with each one is an option, and then we're rendering the name. So the styles are coming in here. So if you want to look further into the styles, they will be included in the repo as well. So that is the drop down component complete. We need to now render this onto the page, passing in the type useState. So let's go ahead and do that. So essentially the same piece of code, which is const type and set type is equal to an empty string of the React useState. And then we just need to render the drop down now and pass in the set type, which will update the state for type in here. So what I want to do is I want to console log the type, and I also want to console log the search just to see if everything is working correctly before we hook it into this Pokemon grid here. So now going back into the browser in our build over here, if we inspect, and we just need to create a container for this top section as well. In the console, if I expand this out further, and I'm just going to clear this out. So in here, if I typed in, for example, Charmander, you can see it's updating the state here. So it is re-rendering and Charmander is updating like so. And then if I was to select the type of Pokemon as Fire, you can see now Fire and Charmander are updating. And let me just double check if I do Ghost, which is updating as well. So that would be like Ghastly or Haunter or whatever the Ghost Pokemon is that you want. But essentially, these two components now are hooked up, and we now need to filter them out here, and we will do that next.